When the email from Lena arrived, I was standing in my big office high above the city of Seattle. My office had huge glass windows that went from the floor all the way to the ceiling. Through those windows, I could see the whole city spread out below me. The streets looked like thin lines, and the cars moving on them looked like tiny toy cars. The city made a quiet humming sound far below. On my computer screen, a new email blinked. It was from my younger sister, Lena. I opened it slowly and began to read. The message said, "Dad lost his job. Mom's hospital bills are getting bigger and bigger. We are having a very hard time paying everything. I know you have your own problems too, but if you can help even a little, please tell me." I let out a small laugh, but it was not a happy laugh. It sounded dry and empty. If only they knew the truth. They believed I was still struggling in life. They thought I worked small jobs in stores and lived in a tiny apartment. But they had no idea what my life had really become. As I stared at the message, my mind slowly went back in time to something that happened 12 years ago. I was only 16 years old then. I remember standing in our small living room in Tucson, Arizona. The room was simple and a little cramped. There was an old couch against the wall and a small coffee table in the middle of the room. On that coffee table sat a very important letter. It was my acceptance letter from the Rhode Island School of Design. When I first opened that letter, my heart jumped with excitement. It felt like my dream was finally starting. But my father did not feel the same way. He stood across the room, holding the letter in his hand. His face looked dark and angry, like a storm cloud about to burst. "Art," he said loudly. "Art is not a real career, Elara." He waved the letter in the air as if it were something dirty or dangerous. "You are going to waste your life chasing silly dreams," he continued. "You need to grow up." My mother stood near the window. She stayed very quiet. She almost never spoke when my father became angry. Instead, she would stand still and look down, as if trying to disappear. I spoke softly. "I got a partial scholarship," I explained. "I also saved money from tutoring younger students and working summer jobs. I can make this work." But my father shook his head firmly. "No," he said. "You will study engineering just like your sister. That is a real career." End of discussion. For many years of my life, I would have stayed quiet. I would have listened. But that day something inside me changed. For the first time, I said one simple word. "No." The room suddenly felt very still. My father's face turned red. His hands tightened into fists at his sides. "Then get out," he shouted loudly. "If you think you are so independent, then prove it. But do not come crawling back to this house later." That night, I packed my belongings. I did not have many things. I folded my thrift store clothes and placed them inside an old duffel bag. My younger sister Lena stood in the hallway watching me. Her eyes were wide with shock. "You're really leaving?" she asked. "Yes," I said quietly. "I have to. I cannot keep living a life that is not truly mine." When I finished packing, my mother quietly walked into the room. She did not say much, as usual. But she placed something small into my hand. It was a tiny velvet pouch. "Your Aunt Celestine wanted you to have this when the time was right," my mother said softly. "I think that time has come." Inside the pouch was a delicate silver pendant. There was also a tiny folded note taped to a small brass key. Later that night, I sat alone in a cheap motel room outside Phoenix. The room smelled faintly of cleaning spray and old carpet. I finally opened the note. It was a letter written by Aunt Celestine. It said, "Elara, if you are reading this letter, then you have already taken the first brave step toward becoming the person you were meant to be. I am already proud of you." I read those words again and again. For the first time that day, I felt calm. At that moment, I made a promise to myself. I would never go back home to beg for help. I would never return just to prove something. I would only move forward and build my own life. The next part of the letter surprised me. "I always knew you would find your way," it said. "The key you have opened safety deposit box number 132 at Puget Sound Credit Union. Open it when you are ready. Inside you will find what you need to begin. And remember, true art is not only about beauty. It is about seeing value where other people see nothing." The next morning, I visited Puget Sound Credit Union. My hands were shaking a little when I showed my ID to the employee at the desk. Soon they brought out a small metal box. It was not very large, but what I found inside changed my entire life. Inside the box were several pieces of beautiful antique silver jewelry. There were also stacks of neatly organized papers tied together. On top of everything was another letter written in Aunt Celestine's elegant handwriting. The letter explained a big secret. Aunt Celestine had not simply been someone who liked collecting pretty objects. She had been a serious antique dealer many years ago. Quietly, she had built a valuable collection. The silver jewelry in the box was very rare. These were not cheap pieces from a store. They were genuine Art Nouveau and early Art Deco designs. Beautiful creations made many years ago. They had been passed down carefully from one generation to another. At the end of the letter she wrote, "Take these pieces to Adrian Moretti at Rain City Antiques. He will understand their true value." So that is exactly what I did. When Adrian finished studying the jewelry, I felt like my heart might stop. "The total value of these pieces is more than $430,000, he told me. My legs felt weak. I almost could not stand it. But money was not the most important part of that moment. Adrian looked at me carefully. "You have a very sharp eye," he said. "Most people never learn how to see small details like that. Have you ever thought about learning the antique business?" That question changed everything. Adrian became my teacher. He taught me how to study metals and gemstones closely. He showed me how to read old documents that proved where antiques came from. He explained how auctions worked and how collectors spoke quietly when making deals. He also taught me how to search through dusty estate sales to find hidden treasures. I loved learning all of it. By the time I was 19 years old, I started a small online store selling vintage jewelry. When I turned 23, I opened my first real boutique in Capitol Hill. My business continued to grow. Now I am 26 years old. I owned several private antique galleries across the West Coast. My personal net worth had reached more than $14 million. But almost nobody knew about it. There were no big news stories about me. Even my own family did not know. They believed I still worked random retail jobs. They thought I lived in a tiny apartment somewhere in Spokane. I even posted pictures online to make it look that way. Pictures of cheap dinners. Pictures of laundromats. Pictures of small, simple rooms. Everything was carefully planned. I liked staying quiet while my business slowly grew stronger. That peaceful silence lasted until Lena's email arrived. After reading her message, I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and called her. "Lena," I said, "bring Mom and Dad to my office tomorrow." "My office?" she asked with confusion. "You mean the consignment shop you used to help at?" "No," I answered calmly. "My real office. Come to Rainier Tower. I will text you the address." Lena laughed nervously. "You cannot just walk into a place like that pretending," she said. I smiled as I looked out at the city skyline. "I bought Rainier Tower last spring," I said. "Trust me, they will let me in. Be here at 9 in the morning. And tell Mom and Dad to bring every paper about their mortgage." The next morning I stood beside the tall windows in my office. My office was located on the very top floor of Rainier Tower. Far below, I saw a familiar blue SUV driving toward the private entrance. It was my family's car. Even from 30 floors above, I could imagine how nervous they felt. A security guard walked over to them and spoke politely. Then he guided them through a private entrance into the building. Soon they entered the executive elevator that only a few people were allowed to use. A soft sound came from my intercom. "Miss Voss," my assistant said. "Your family has arrived." "Send them in," I replied calmly. A moment later, the door opened. The second they stepped into my office, they froze. My father stopped walking in the middle of the room. His eyes moved slowly across the space. He looked at the shining wooden floors. He looked at the tall windows showing the Seattle skyline. My mother held the doorframe as if she needed something to steady herself. Her eyes traveled across the room in silent shock. Lena stood behind them, blinking again and again as if she could not believe what she was seeing. They had expected something small. Maybe a simple shop. Maybe a shared office. Not this. My office looked more like a beautiful art gallery. Rare Art Nouveau sculptures stood around the room. Glass display cases held antique silver jewelry and sparkling gemstones. Behind my desk stood a large rosewood desk that had once belonged to a Rockefeller estate. And beyond everything was the breathtaking view of the city stretching into the distance. "Elara," my mother whispered. Her voice trembled. What is all this?" I smiled gently. "This is my office," I said. "Welcome to Voss Fine Art and Antiquities." My father's expression quickly changed. First confusion, then anger. "No," he said loudly. "You work in retail. You live in a tiny apartment. I have seen your pictures online." I walked over to a glass display case. Inside rested a beautiful Art Deco brooch. I had once bought it for only $700. "I am actually the CEO and founder of the largest private antique brokerage on the West Coast," I said calmly. Those pictures online were carefully planned. Lena's mouth fell open. The Rainier Tower, she whispered slowly. Belongs to me, I finished. Technically the building belonged to my company. But since I owned the company, it was still mine. That was when my father exploded with anger. You hid this from us? He shouted. We are your family. I calmly interrupted him. Yes, I said. I quietly built something successful. I wanted to prove that you were wrong. Then I walked back to my desk and sat down. I looked at the folder in his hands. Now, I said calmly, let's talk about your mortgage. The room became completely silent. My father's anger slowly faded into shock. My mother gently touched the smooth edge of my desk, as if checking whether everything was real. Lena stood beside a sculpture near the coffee machine, still speechless. Then I opened my laptop. I logged into my business dashboard. Slowly, I turned the screen toward them. If we are telling the truth today, I said, then you should see this. On the screen was my current balance. $14,236,542. My mother gasped and held her chest. My father gripped the arm of his chair tightly. Lena dropped the folder she was holding. This, I said while sliding a thick file across the desk, is why you are here. You are 3 months behind on your mortgage payments. The bank has already started the foreclosure process. Lena looked shocked. How do you know that? She asked. I remained calm. I know, I said quietly, because I own the largest share of Cascadia Trust. That is the bank that gave you your mortgage. I know everything. I turned my eyes toward Dad. First I thought about his risky day trading in the stock market. He had always believed he could make quick money, but most of the time it only made things worse. Then I thought about Mom's hospital bills that kept growing every month. After that I looked at Lena and the condo project she started in Capitol Hill. The project was supposed to make a lot of money, but instead it was losing money fast. For a moment, nobody said anything. The room became very quiet. The silence felt heavy, almost painful. The only sound we could hear was the soft hum of the busy city outside the window. Finally, Dad spoke. His voice sounded rough and tired. You knew we were drowning in problems, he said slowly. You knew we were in trouble, and you said nothing. We are your family, Elara. I slowly stood up from my chair. I placed both of my hands on my smooth rosewood desk. Do you remember the night you told me to leave? I asked calmly. Dad's face became stiff. You told me, don't come crawling back when you fail. Those were your exact words. Dad frowned and crossed his arms. We were trying to protect you, he said quickly. I shook my head. No, I said quietly but firmly. You were trying to control me. That's not the same thing at all. Then I walked toward the large window in my office. Outside, the city of Seattle looked bright and beautiful in the sunshine. In the distance I could see the tall Space Needle rising above the buildings. I looked at the skyline for a moment. To me, it was not just a view. It was a symbol of everything I had quietly built during the last 10 years. 10 years, I said softly. 10 years with no help from you. No support. No belief. It was only me, my ideas, my instincts, and the key Aunt Celestine gave me. Mom suddenly looked up, confused. Celestine, she asked. What did she give you? I turned back to them. She gave me faith, I said. She believed in me when none of you did. She knew I could build something real. I slowly looked at each of their faces. Every holiday you laughed at me, I continued. You said things like, still playing with antiques, Elara? Or you joked, maybe Lena can hire you as her assistant. Lena lowered her head and stared at the floor. But now, I said in a steady voice, now that you have seen my bank balance, suddenly I matter. Suddenly I'm important again. Suddenly I'm family. Dad straightened in his chair and used his serious business voice. We can talk about this later, he said. Right now we need to focus on. Stop, I said, raising my hand. My voice was calm but strong. Before you say anything else, let me show you something. I pressed a small hidden button on my desk. Behind me, the huge digital screen built into the wall lit up. Many windows began appearing on the screen one by one. Files, numbers, documents. What you're about to see will explain everything, I said. On the screen there were bank statements. There were property papers. There were loan records. There were notices about missed payments. There were also records of bad investments. This, I said, pointing to the screen, is everything. Every loan you took. Every debt you owe. Every bad decision added to the problem. I took a small breath before speaking again. The total money needed to fix everything and make things stable again is exactly $2,400,000. For a moment nobody moved. Dad's eyes changed. I saw something in them that I had not seen for 10 long years. Hope. Lena looked shocked. Her mouth opened slightly as if she didn't know what to say. Mom reached forward and gently touched the back of my hand. I carefully moved my hand away. I have had that money saved in a special reserve account for years, I explained. Every time a foreclosure letter arrives, every time things become worse. I was watching. Lena spoke very softly. Watching for what? To see if any of you would change, I answered. To see if you would take responsibility for your choices. But you never did. I slowly stood up again and allowed the silence to fill the room. Instead, you borrowed more money, I said. You mortgaged the house again. You blamed bad luck. Then I walked back and sat down in my chair. Sunlight shined through the window and reflected on the beautiful glass sculpture behind me. Here is what will happen now, I said clearly. I will pay every debt. I will save the house. And I will create a financial trust that will keep all of you safe in the future. Suddenly everyone started speaking at once. Their voices were full of relief. I lifted my hand again. The room became quiet. But, I said firmly, there are conditions. The air in the room felt still. First, I said while looking directly at Dad, you must retire. No more day trading. No more risky stock bets. No more crypto schemes. You need to rest now. You worked hard for many years, but you have also caused enough damage. Dad's jaw tightened, and he looked down at the floor. Second, I said, turning toward Lena, you will end the failing Capitol Hill condo project. After that, you will enroll in the music therapy program you always dreamed about. Lena's eyes widened with surprise. A tear slowly rolled down her cheek. She had not talked about that dream for many years. Third, I said gently to Mom, you will finally open the bookstore you have always wanted near Green Lake. I will pay for everything needed to start it. Mom gasped softly. Her eyes filled with happy tears. That dream had been hidden away for 30 years while she supported Dad's career. And finally, I said while looking at all of them, we will go to family therapy together every week. Because this problem is not only about money anymore. Dad took a deep breath, looking like he wanted to argue. But Mom gently placed her hand on his arm. We will do it, she said softly. All of it. I nodded once. Then I pressed the intercom button on my desk. Mila, please bring in the contracts. A moment later, Mila walked into the office carrying several thick folders. These documents make everything official, I explained while sliding the folders across the desk. Take them home and read every line carefully. They all nodded. Dad's hands trembled slightly as he held the papers, as if he was afraid they might disappear. As they began to leave the office, I spoke one more time. Dad, do you remember what you said to me 10 years ago? He stopped and slowly turned around. His face showed many emotions at once, guilt, pride, and regret. You said I should call you when I failed. I looked at him calmly. I never failed, I said quietly. I simply succeeded without you. They left the office without saying another word. The silence followed them like a shadow. I walked to the window and watched their car join the busy traffic of Seattle. A few minutes later, Mila came back into the room. She placed a warm cup of chamomile tea on my desk. You okay? She asked kindly. I paused for a moment. I thought about all the lonely nights when I worked until sunrise. I remembered the quiet holidays when I had no family beside me. I remembered the many times I doubted myself. Then I thought about the calm feeling inside me now. Yeah, I said softly with a small smile. I think I finally am. The next morning they returned to my office. This time they carried the signed contracts. Their smiles were small and careful, and the future between us still felt uncertain. Years of silence and hurt cannot disappear in one day. But it was a start. Dad truly retired this time. One quiet morning, while we were drinking coffee together, he apologized to me. I didn't cry, but his words opened something deep inside my heart. Mom finally opened her bookstore. She named it the Violet Finch. It sits in Fremont between a small record store and a cozy coffee roastery. People in the neighborhood love the shop. But most importantly, Mom loves it. Lena closed the failing condo project. She joined the music therapy program she once dreamed about. Now she teaches music at a community center in Ballard. When she laughs now, it sounds natural and happy. As for me, I continued building my business. But I stopped hiding my success. I stopped pretending to be smaller just so others could feel bigger. Because real power is not about proving people wrong. Real power is about proving yourself right. On my desk sits Aunt Celestine's old jewelry box. Inside it is the one thing I never sold. a simple gold locket with her photograph inside. On difficult days, I open the locket and read the small note she left me. It says, "True art is not only about creating beauty. It is about seeing value where others see nothing." She was right, and the most precious treasure I ever discovered was my own worth.